Buenos dias, campeones. It's Mr. B here, and today I would like to read you a story titled A Chair for My Mother. Before we get into reading this book, I want to make a little connection with a book that we've read earlier that was called Those Shoes. And if you remember in the book Those Shoes, Antonio wanted a pair of the high-top black sneakers with white stripes. He wanted them because all of the other kids at school had them, but his mother kept telling him that what he needed was a pair of winter boots because winter was coming, and she knew that he would need boots to keep his feet warm. But he really wanted those shoes. When he did find a pair of those shoes, they were too small and they didn't fit. And he ended up giving them to another child, Jeremy, I believe it was, gave them to Antonio, and Antonio needed those shoes. Jeremy wanted them because everybody else had them, but Antonio needed them because the shoes that he had just weren't good enough to keep his feet warm or covered. They were falling apart. So at the end, Jeremy gave those shoes to Antonio without telling him. He did it as a surprise, and that was an act of kindness that he showed. So we're going to continue talking about our wants and our needs and the differences between those in the book we're going to read today, okay? So before we get started reading, I want to introduce you to some vocabulary words that we're going to be coming across in this story. One of the vocabulary words that we're going to see is the word savings. Now, savings is money that you put aside to save to buy something special. It's in the word savings, something that you save so that you can afford to buy something that you need or possibly just something that you want. Another vocabulary word that we're going to learn in this story is the word bargain. A bargain is when you get something at a much lower price than it should be or that you were expecting. So, for instance, you may go to buy a $10 toy and find out that it's on sale for $5. Well, that would be a good bargain. You would get the same thing, but for a cheaper price. So that's bargain. We'll look for that in our story. And our final vocabulary word that we're going to focus on is furniture. Furniture can be any piece of equipment or things that you put into your house or your office that make it more suitable for living. So furniture might be a couch or a chair, or if you're in an office, a piece of furniture might be your desk or a copier or a computer. So those are things that will help make the area you're living or working in a little more suitable. So without further ado, let's get on to reading A Chair for My Mother. All right, A Chair for My Mother, and this is by Vera B. Williams, and it is also a Caldecott Honor Book, which means it was honored by the Caldecott Society or Association as being a very good book to read. So, here we go, A Chair for My Mother by Vera Williams. My mother works as a waitress in the Blue Tile Diner. After school sometimes I go to meet her there. Then her boss, Josephine, gives me a job too. I wash the salts and peppers and fill the ketchups. One time I peeled all the onions for the onion soup. When I finish, Josephine says, "Good work, honey," and pays me. And every time I put half of my money into the jar. It takes a long time to fill a jar this big. Every day when my mother comes home from work, I take down the jar. My mama empties all her change from tips out of her purse for me to count. Then we push all of the coins into the jar. Sometimes my mama is laughing when she comes home from work. Sometimes she's so tired she falls asleep while I count the money out into piles. Some days she has lots of tips. Some days she has only a little. Then she looks worried. But each evening, every single shiny coin goes into that jar. We sit in the kitchen to count the tips. Usually Grandma sits with us too. While we count, she likes to hum. Often she has money in her old leather wallet for us. Whenever she gets a good bargain on tomatoes or bananas or something she buys, she puts by the savings and they go into the jar. When we can't get a single other coin into the jar, we're going to take out all the money and go and buy a chair. Yes, a chair. A wonderful, beautiful, fat, soft armchair. We will get one covered in velvet with roses all over it. We are going to get the best chair in the whole world. That is because our old chairs burned up. There was a big fire in our other house. All our chairs burned. So did our sofa, and so did everything else. That wasn't such a long time ago. My mother and I were coming home from buying new shoes. I had new sandals. She had new pumps. We were walking to our house from the bus. We were looking at everyone's tulips. She was saying she liked the red tulips, and I was saying I liked yellow ones. And then we came to our block. Right outside our house stood two big fire engines. I could see lots of smoke. Tall orange flames came out of the roof. All the neighbors stood in a bunch across the street. Mama grabbed my hand and we ran. My Uncle Sandy saw us and ran to us. Mama yelled, "Where's Mother?" I yelled, "Where's my grandma?" My Aunt Ida waved and shouted, she's here, she's okay, don't worry." Grandma was all right. Our cat was safe too, though it took a while to find her. But everything else in our whole house was spoiled. What was left of the house was turned to charcoal and ashes. We went to stay with my mother's sister, Aunt Ida, and Uncle Sandy. Then we were able to move into the apartment downstairs. We painted the walls yellow. The floors were all shiny, but the rooms were very empty. The first day we moved in, the neighbors brought pizza and cake and ice cream, and they brought a lot of other things too. The family across the street brought a table and 3 kitchen chairs. The very old man next door gave us a bed from when his children were little. My other grandpa brought us his beautiful rug. My mother's other sister, Sally, had made us red and white curtains. Mama's boss, Josephine, brought pots and pans, silverware, and dishes. My cousin brought me her own stuffed bear. Everyone clapped when my grandma made a speech. And boys and girls, I don't know if you remember, but in Grace for President, Grace made a speech too. Grace made a speech about why she would be a good candidate for presidency. Let's see what Grandma's speech is about. "You all are the kindest people," she said, "and we thank you very, very much. It's lucky we're young and can start all over." So Grandma's speech was about giving thanks to everyone that had helped them. That was last year, but we still have no sofa and no big chairs. When Mama comes home, her feet hurt. "There's no good place for me to take a load off my feet," she says. When Grandma wants to sit back and hum and cut up potatoes, she has to get as comfortable as she can on a hard kitchen chair. So that is how come Mama brought home the biggest jar she could find at the diner, and all the coins started to go into that jar. Now the jar is too heavy for me to lift down. Uncle Sandy gave me a quarter. He had to boost me up so I could put it in. Can you tell what coin this is? That's a dime. Yes, it's a dime, worth 10 cents. After supper, Mama and Grandma and I stood in front of the jar. "Well, I never would have believed it, but I guess it's full," Mama said. My mother brought home little paper wrappers for the nickels and the dimes and the quarters. I counted them all out and wrapped them all up. On my mother's day off, we took all the coins to the bank. The bank exchanged them for $10 bills. Then we took the bus downtown to shop for our chair. We shopped through 4 furniture stores. Oh, look, boys and girls, that's one of our vocabulary words, furniture. We shopped through 4 furniture stores. We tried out big chairs and smaller ones, high chairs and low chairs, soft chairs and harder ones. Grandma said she felt like Goldilocks and the 3 bears trying out all those chairs. Finally, we found the chair we were all dreaming of, and the money in the jar was enough to pay for it. We called Aunt Ida and Uncle Sandy. They came right down in their pickup truck to drive the chair home for us. They knew we couldn't wait for it to be delivered. I tried out our chair in the back of the truck. Mama wouldn't let me sit there while we drove, but they let me sit in it while they carried it up to the door. We set the chair right beside the window with the red and white curtains. Grandma and Mama and I all sat in it while Aunt Ida took our picture. Now Grandma sits in it and talks with people going by in the daytime. Mama sits down and watches the news on TV when she comes home from her job. After supper, I sit with her, and she can reach right up and turn out the light if I fall asleep in her lap. You know, boys and girls, that reminds me of when I was a little kid. I used to love to sit in my mother's lap, and I would almost always fall asleep because I felt so comfortable with my mom. So that's our story about a chair for my mother. Now, we talked earlier about wants and needs. This chair for her mother was definitely a need for her mother to have a place to come in and sit down after working a long, hard day, as well as a need for her grandmother to sit comfortably while she cut potatoes, and a place for she and her mom to sit in after supper and talk about things before she fell asleep. All right, boys and girls, thank you so much. I appreciate it. I've really enjoyed reading this book, and I hope that you've enjoyed it as well. Take care, and I'll see you next time.